I want to begin by extending a warm welcome to the 5 nominees who are before us today. Let me thank you each for your willingness to serve our country and to take on some really important roles to move our economy forward. We recognize the personal and professional sacrifices that public service often entails, and we are grateful for your readiness to contribute your time, energy, and expertise at a pivotal moment of our economy and for American competitiveness around the world. Today's hearing is focused on a new group of well-qualified individuals whose leadership will be central to advancing President Trump's pro-growth, pro-America economy. This agenda is built on expanding opportunity, promoting investment, and putting American workers first. Each of these positions under consideration today is essential to that mission. From enforcing export laws and revitalizing our trade posture to improving housing access and bolstering financial stability. These nominees would be entrusted with responsibilities that affect millions of Americans' daily lives and livelihoods. Let's begin with housing. We have 2 HUD nominees before us today, Mr. DeMarzo and Mr. Traynor. If these 2 would be confirmed, you will each serve in distinct but deeply interconnected roles that are essential to fulfilling HUD's mission. Mr. DeMarzo, your role will be to ensure that HUD remains responsive and accountable to the American people by fostering strong partnerships across all levels of government. And Mr. Traynor, you are charged with safeguarding the principles of fair housing, ensuring that every American, regardless of race, background, or zip code, has a real shot at the American dream. Whether it's a single mother in Charleston like the one that raised me and my brother, or a veteran returning home and trying to rebuild his life, Americans are looking for leadership that not only understands their needs, but also acts accordingly. Should you be confirmed, the work before you will be challenging, but it carries a profound purpose. Your efforts will not only touch lives, individual lives, but also help shape a stronger, more responsive housing system for generations to come. Mr.
Yvanovich, Senator.
Thank you. Mr. Yvanovich, as nominee to lead the export bank, Exim Bank, you step forward in a moment of real consequence. American exporters and manufacturers face fierce competition, especially from China and other state-backed companies who don't always play by the rules. The Exim Bank is a vital tool for ensuring U.S. businesses compete and win on a level playing field. Ms. Brooke, I think I got that part right. Good. At the Treasury Department, you would be tasked with representing U.S. financial institutions abroad. This includes securing fair international trade and investment deals and leveraging relationships with multilateral development banks to grow U.S. leadership in the global economy. And finally, Mr. Peters, your role at the Department of Commerce will help secure American innovation. From manufacturing and semiconductors to emerging technologies that will define the 21st century economy, we will enforce our export control laws and bring violators to justice. Each of you brings a strong track record of public service and private sector experience. Just as important, you bring a clear understanding of the mission at hand. The stakes are high, and the American people deserve a team that is ready to go to work. I look forward to hearing from each of you today. I now recognize Ranking Member Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we have 5 nominees for 4 different agencies, so I'll just jump right in and get to the point. I want to start with housing. President Trump ran for office on a big promise to the American people that he would bring down the cost of living. He has not fulfilled that promise, particularly when it comes to housing. His chaotic tariff policy has created uncertainty for home builders, for home buyers, and for renters. Tariffs have increased the cost of lumber, steel, and everything else needed to build or fix up a house. And since the president's tariffs began to kick into effect in March, interest rates on mortgages have gone up by nearly 1/4 point. For the average family buying a new home, that means about $600 a year in extra costs. And the costs keep piling up. Home insurance rates are going through the roof. The Wall Street Journal reported last week that energy bills will go up by 4% compared with last summer. The last thing that Americans need is for the Trump administration to make housing even more expensive. But that is exactly what the Trump administration is doing. The president's budget proposal calls for the complete elimination of federal programs that help communities build new housing. It calls for tens of billions of dollars of cuts to federal housing investments. Meanwhile, the president's big, beautiful bill allows companies to continue jacking up rents using illegal AI schemes. All of this while the administration begins to trickle out plans to reprivatize Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the government-sponsored enterprises that were created to provide both liquidity and stability to the mortgage market. This is an effort that seems designed to reward Trump's billionaire friends, even as economists tell us it will push mortgage rates for families even higher. It is one disaster after another for homeowners and for renters. And now, if Mr. Traynor is confirmed as HUD's Assistant Secretary for Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, he would be responsible for enforcing the nation's housing anti-discrimination laws. Already, bad actors accused of discrimination are literally walking away from legal negotiations because they know the Trump administration will do nothing to stop them. We know Mr. Traynor's record. He has led the Department of Education's efforts to declare diversity, equity, and inclusion unlawful and to pause the department's civil rights investigations. I am concerned that he intends to bring that same hostile approach to HUD. Next, I want to turn my attention to Mr. Peters, the nominee to be Commerce Department's Assistant Secretary of Export Enforcement in the Bureau of Industry and Security. It's a critical national security job. You would be responsible for enforcing our nation's export control laws and ensuring that our adversaries cannot get a hold of our cutting-edge chips and other critical technologies. But I am worried that by the time you get there, Mr. Peters, your job will be to close the barn door after the horse has escaped. Again and again, the president and his gang of Silicon Valley tech bros have made questionable deals that weaken our national security. It needs to be cleaned up, and I hope, Mr. Peters, that you are up to the job. I will have questions for the record for our other witnesses. Mr. Yvanovich, the Export-Import Bank that you lead, or that you would lead, has escaped years of attacks trying to kill the agency, and it has just barely escaped. I want to hear how we can reform EXIM to better help American small businesses sell their products abroad, especially amid President Trump's foolish trade war. Mr. Brooke, I want to hear whether you'll give the president honest advice for his on-again, off-again, on-again, off-again, on-again, off-again tariffs are hurting American businesses and families. And Mr. DeMarzo, I will need your commitment to provide timely responses to requests from me and my staff and others on the banking committee so that we can get the information that we need from HUD. Mr. Chairman, that ends my opening remarks. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. We'll now swear in the nominees. If you'll stand, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Do you agree to appear and testify before any duly constituted committee of the Senate? You may take your seats. Thank you. Your written statements will be made part of the record in their entirety. Please keep your oral comments to 5 minutes. Mr. DeMarzo, you are now recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Warren, and members of the committee. I'd like to thank President Trump for nominating me for this important position and Secretary Turner for his support and leadership. I'd also like to thank my wife, Britt, and our son, Elliot, who just celebrated his first birthday, and he's very happy to be here. The role of HUD's Office of Congressional and Intergovernmental Relations is to serve as HUD's primary liaison for federal, state, and local officials. If I'm privileged enough to be confirmed, my goal will be to provide support for congressional offices by helping you resolve issues for your local officials and constituents. I received my master's degree in public policy from Rutgers University in 2011, and I've spent the past 14 years working for state and federal officials. I most recently served as Chief of Staff for a member of the U.S. House of Representatives, where I was on the requesting side of help and assistance from HUD and other federal agencies. I saw firsthand the importance of being able to provide answers and guidance from federal agencies for our mayors, county officials, and state representatives. I was very appreciative of the knowledgeable and responsive staff in the congressional offices I worked with during my time in the House. I served all 4 years during the last Trump administration at HUD, and I plan to serve all 4 years of this administration at HUD because I'm passionate about providing support for federal, state, local, and tribal officials. I enjoyed traveling with Secretary Ben Carson to 36 states to meet mayors, housing authority leaders, and the residents HUD serves. I look forward to continuing that service under Secretary Scott Turner, who is passionate about the mission of HUD. In my prior service at HUD, I was fortunate to develop great working relationships with leaders in HUD's program offices. If confirmed, my goal will be to problem solve, to cut through red tape, and to ensure that your local officials receive the answers they need from HUD. My top priorities will be constituent services, technical assistance on legislation, and open communication between the department and your offices. I will work to build a team that is dedicated to that mission. If confirmed, I promise to provide every federal, state, and local official the support from HUD that they need to properly serve their constituents. Thank you once again, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership, to the ranking member, and to the members of this committee for your time and consideration.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Traynor, please proceed.
Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Warren, and distinguished members of this committee, it is an honor to appear before you as President Trump's nominee to be Assistant Secretary for Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. I want to first thank President Trump for the confidence he has placed in me by nominating me to serve in this critical position within the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. I want to also thank Secretary Turner for his strong support of my nomination and continued servant leadership at the department. Most important, I am so grateful for and wish to thank my beautiful wife, Goli, who's seated behind me, for her unwavering support these last 8 years. I would not be here today without her continuous encouragement. Finally, I'd like to mention this gift from God, my beautiful daughter, Story, who will be 5 years old this summer. She's the center of our little family, and given her fierce independent streak, and what I mean by that, Mr. Chairman, is she might decide to come up to the dais and wait while we have other business to discuss.
Well, we welcome her now.
We did leave her in school, but I do hope one day she'll watch this hearing and be proud of her father. Mr. Chairman, I'm a first-generation college and law school graduate who grew up in a proud working-class family in Brooklyn, New York. My late father worked with his hands, a civil servant for the city of New York for almost 30 years, and a decorated Vietnam veteran in the United States Army. My mother, whom we lost to cancer when I was 17 years old, was a homemaker who became a secretary once her 2 sons were old enough for what we used to call latchkey parenting. We didn't have a lot of money. We had a lot of arguments. I recall some yelling, but not a lot of money. What my parents lacked in material resources, however, they compensated for with a strong work ethic and a lot of common sense. They taught me many lessons, but 2 of the most important ones have informed my life's work. First, everyone, no matter their race, faith, or status, should be treated equally and with dignity. Second, when the powerful run roughshod over the powerless, those who can do something about it must. I am convinced that these lessons are what led me to a life in the law, generally, and civil rights and criminal law work specifically. When I started my law practice, I made handling appointed criminal cases a priority so that I could represent indigent defendants and ensure that they received the same zealous representation that their better-off contemporaries did. In my civil rights and criminal defense practice, I had represented hundreds of poor and struggling American men, women, and even children who found themselves entangled in New York City's complex justice system. In each case, my clients received the aggressive legal advocacy to which they were entitled, and the results that I obtained for them spoke to that commitment. In 2021, I brought my years of legal experience to the nation's capital to protect the constitutional rights of all Americans. First, I joined the America First Policy Institute as senior litigation counsel, where we work to defend the rule of law and restore the supremacy of the individual against government overreach. I then had the privilege of serving as senior special counsel to the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on the Judiciary under the energetic leadership of Chairman Jim Jordan. The committee's work exposed large-scale discriminatory actions waged against certain Americans, either through weaponized law enforcement or proxy censorship. Which brings me to my nomination to serve as the next Assistant Secretary for Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. Discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, familial status, national origin, and disability is illegal under the Fair Housing Act. It is morally reprehensible, and it undermines our shared identity as Americans. It not only creates arbitrary barriers to home ownership and limitations on individual choice about where one chooses to live or not to live, but also demeans the dignity of the individual subjected to discrimination, who in some cases may not have the means to address it. With my 10 years of experience as a civil rights litigator, criminal defense lawyer, trial attorney, congressional oversight counsel, and current acting head of the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, I am ideally suited to lead HUD's Office for Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. If confirmed, I will faithfully apply and vigorously enforce the law as Congress intended. I will work tirelessly to eliminate the scourge of housing discrimination from American life and to recover the American dream of home ownership for our fellow citizens. And I will work with all members of this committee in that effort. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Yvanovich, please proceed.
Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Warren, distinguished members of this committee, I'm honored to be here today as President Trump's nominee to serve as Chairman and President of the Export-Import Bank of the United States. Thank you for the time many of you and your staff have graciously spent with me in anticipation of this hearing. I would like to thank President Trump for his passionate commitment to working-class Americans and his unwavering devotion to America's reindustrialization, ensuring the American worker will once again produce world-class products and implement world-leading technologies. I'm grateful for the opportunity to support him in this mission. It is truly an honor of a lifetime. My wife, Daphne, is here with me today. She is just as radiant as she was on our first date back in college. I want to thank her for her boundless love and support and for being an extraordinary mother to our 4 young children, Philomena, John Jr., Domenica, and Giovanna Inez. Here with me today as well, along with other family and dear friends, are 2 more women who have played an outsized role in my life, especially since my parents passed away too soon. My Aunt Mita and my mother-in-law, Lisa, who have been mothers to me as much as I have felt a son to the both of them. Thank you for the love and generosity that you've given me. Throughout this confirmation process, I've also benefited from the insights and support of the current leading, acting, as well as the former leadership of the Export-Import Bank from both parties. I'm immensely grateful to its former chairs, Rita Jo Lewis, Kimberly Reed, and Fred Hochberg, for their advice and support. Distinguished members of this committee, I would not be sitting here today without the stable, well-paying manufacturing jobs that once were abundantly available in America. After suffering the horrors of World War II and experiencing the economic scarcity and oppression that followed under communism in Southeast Europe, my family immigrated legally to America, starting over from scratch when my parents were both young. Without knowing a word of English, they took up the toughest of jobs, including my grandfather, working varying shifts at a steel plant. It was thanks to their hard work and strong working-class jobs that I got to live the American dream. I was first in my family to attend college, graduating from Princeton University, and later the first to obtain a graduate degree, bless you, earning an MBA from the Wharton School of Business. I went on to build a career financing, investing, and business building across the energy, critical infrastructure, mining, and manufacturing industries. During my prior government service, I was managing director and regional head at the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, DFC, where I worked to mobilize U.S.-led financing alternatives to counter China and Russia. I was also tasked with implementing the Washington agreements brokered by President Trump between Kosovo and Serbia by coordinating an all-of-government economic engagement, including EXIM and DFC. I've managed the successful development and construction of leading U.S. energy export projects, as well as the expansion of specialized manufacturing companies that produce vital tools and equipment, made in America, sold all around the world. All throughout, I developed a keen understanding of how large and small businesses, eager to expand their operations, make the toughest of strategic decisions, especially the challenges they face and how to finance growth. The crisis facing the American economy, especially those communities across our nation that have been decimated by the closure or offshoring of factories and production facilities, is dire. Millions of Americans have lost their steady manufacturing jobs since the beginning of this new century. All the while, our strategic adversary, China, has used its trade surplus and built its military to gain control of vital global supply chains. Distinguished committee members, I came away from our conversations deeply heartened that you share the same concerns about the future of America and our economic security. I'm confident that with your support and God's help, the Export-Import Bank can play an important role in carrying out President Trump's vision of revitalizing America's economy and helping to create and support the jobs of the future across our great country, especially the small and medium-sized businesses in our communities most in need. We can help our country regain control over our most vital supply chains, ensuring that America will always have access to everything Americans need when we need it most. Together, we can play a key role in ensuring that future generations of Americans live in times of freedom, economic security, and U.S.-led innovation. I hope for the opportunity to lead the Export-Import Bank in pursuit of this unifying goal. Thank you for considering my nomination. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Yvanovich. Mr. Brooke?
Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Warren, and members of the committee, I'm honored to be here with you as the nominee for Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for International Trade and Development. I would like to thank President Trump for this opportunity to serve our country, and I would like to thank Secretary Bessent for his confidence in me. I'm also grateful to the members and staff of this committee who have taken the time to meet with me. I have appreciated these opportunities to discuss your priorities, and if confirmed, I look forward to working together. I would like to start by recognizing my wife, Caitlin, who is here today. Caitlin and I met when we were both serving in government, and I am deeply grateful to her for her support, advice, and love. We both thank God every day that He has blessed us with 3 children, Tripp, who's almost 5, Liddy, who's 3, both of whom are here, and Bobby, who's 1. I would also like to recognize my brother and sister, Henry and Beatrice, my brother and sister-in-law, Matt and Nikki, and my grandmother, Helen Brooke. Finally, my parents, Francis and Sharon, and Caitlin's parents, Jeff and Ann Poor, are here. I cannot begin to adequately thank each of you for the unfailing love that you have shown and continue to show to us and our children every day. I have been blessed with the opportunity to dedicate my career to public service. I have had the rare honor of serving as a staffer in the House of Representatives, the Senate, and the executive branch. I want to thank all of my bosses for the faith they have placed in me and for the opportunities they have provided me to work for the betterment of the American people. In particular, I would like to thank my most recent boss, Majority Leader Scalise, for the opportunity he gave me to serve as his policy director. Over the course of several decades and many successive administrations, the United States has tolerated a lack of reciprocity in our trade relationships and the accumulation of unfair foreign trade and economic practices. The consequences of this tolerance and the accretion of unsustainable imbalances have been significant. They have hollowed out America's industrial base, weakened vital supply chains, placed both our national and economic security at risk, and undermined the public's confidence in the global trading system. Moreover, prejudicial trading practices against the United States are not limited to manufactured goods. Our world-leading services exports, especially digital services, are increasingly being targeted by discriminatory digital service taxes that intentionally burden U.S. companies simply because they're successful. These measures undermine the basic principles of tax fairness and market access and demand a strong and coordinated response. It is evident that international economic system is in need of meaningful reform. If confirmed as Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for International Trade and Development, I would lead the Treasury Department's offices charged with enhancing United States competitiveness in international markets, supporting private capital mobilization efforts in multilateral forums, fostering international development, and advancing U.S. interests in multilateral financial institutions such as the World Bank. If confirmed, my top priority would be to carry out Secretary Bessent's policy of getting international institutions back to the basics. That means we must promote a strong international financial system, support access to affordable, reliable energy, restore a fair system for global commerce, ensure that the U.S. dollar remains the world's reserve currency, and refocus international institutions on their core missions. During the first Trump administration, I had the honor of serving as Deputy Director of the National Economic Council under Larry Kudlow. To borrow a phrase from him, the international economic system needs to be growthier. As part of getting international institutions back to the basics, they need to reprioritize economic growth. We also must ground our trade policy in the defense of national and economic security and ensure the promotion of domestic investment and a firm commitment to empower American workers, manufacturers, and Main Street USA. Under the leadership of President Donald Trump and Secretary Bessent, I am confident that the United States can realign the international economic system to better advance American interests while also supporting global prosperity. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Brooke, for your testimony, and certainly wanted to recognize that we saw your grandmother, Mrs. Helen Brooke, outside, who had a fall, and it looks like she was receiving pretty good attention. So certainly our prayers are with your grandmother.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Mr. Peters, you may now proceed.
Chairman Scott, Ranking Member Warren, distinguished senators, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I am grateful to President Trump and Commerce Secretary Lutnick and honored to be their nominee for Assistant Secretary for Export Enforcement at the Bureau of Industry and Security. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge my family. With me here today are my wife, Carrie, my parents, Dr. John and Joan Peters. I'd also like to acknowledge my two wonderful boys, Jack and Connor, who couldn't be here today, and my sister, Melanie. No man is an island, and without their support, I would not be where I am today. My career has been dedicated to public service since graduating from William & Mary Law School in 2008. I served approximately 8 years on active duty in the United States Marine Corps, deploying to Helmand Province in Afghanistan, where I was personally in combat on numerous occasions. Following my active duty service, I joined the Department of Justice, first in the United States Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Virginia, and later in the Criminal Division's Fraud Section. I have worked with incredible federal law enforcement agents in my time at DOJ and throughout my career. Their dedication to the safety and security of the United States is truly inspiring. As a prosecutor, I have personally investigated and prosecuted Export Control Reform Act and International Emergency and Economic Powers Act violations related to the unlawful exporting of sensitive technologies and dual-use products. I have also prosecuted complex fraud schemes and criminal networks, including large-scale Mexican and Colombian transnational criminal organizations and narco-terrorists. President Trump and Secretary Lutnick have rightly highlighted export controls and enforcement as a key part of the America First trade policy. Export enforcement has never been more important than it is at this moment. The largest technological threats we face now come from coordinated but decentralized state and non-state actors. These malign actors seek to access critical U.S. technology to gain key competitive advantages. The United States leads the world in cutting-edge technologies, including semiconductors, biotechnology, advanced manufacturing, aerospace, telecommunications, and artificial intelligence. To maintain and maximize our advantages, we must vigorously enforce our export control laws. If confirmed, it will be my charge to help ensure the world's most sensitive technologies do not end up in the most dangerous hands. This is not a partisan issue, but a matter of national security. I am committed to empowering and supporting our law enforcement officers. While at Justice, I worked hand in hand with agents and developed strong relationships and credibility within their community. Our export control officers are on the front lines, defending against diversion and transshipment of our most sensitive and critical technologies. I support President Trump and Secretary Lutnick's efforts to expand the number of export enforcement agents and our export control officers' presence globally. These personnel will ensure we enforce our export controls and prevent diversion and misuse of strategic technologies. We must remain a world-class law enforcement organization, capable of successfully and aggressively investigating and prosecuting individuals and entities who undermine our nation's economic and national security. The security of the United States and the safety of American citizens has been the through line of my career. It has been an honor beyond measure to serve my country in my prior and current roles. And if I am confirmed as Assistant Secretary for Export Enforcement, it will be my honor to continue in this mission of protecting and serving others. I look forward to working with each of you to ensure we rigorously enforce our export controls and keep our most sensitive technologies out of the hands of our adversaries. Thank you again for this opportunity, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. I'll start the questions off, 5 minutes each for each senator. Mr. Yvanovich, as you know, EXIM's mission set includes promoting U.S. exports, supporting American job creation and small businesses, as well as building supply chain resiliency in strategic industries. If you are confirmed as President Chairman of the EXIM Bank, how will you lead the bank to accomplish this mission?
Senator, thank you very much for the question, and thank you for having generously taken the time with you and your staff to discuss this issue. I know it means a great deal to you, and it means a great deal to me. The Export-Import Bank, I believe, is best positioned to help deliver on President Trump's agenda of economic revitalization, and it's fairly simple. How do we help American companies make more here in America? How do we expand the overseas markets where they could sell their products and services? And all the while, how can we make sure that we're supporting and creating more of those well-paying U.S. jobs? And so I think in order to do so, we have to continue to keep the bank focused on building up a very resilient supply chain. And that means working with small businesses, which is about 90% of what the bank does today, Senator. And I think there are ways we could do it more effectively and efficiently. Furthermore, the challenge that we face from China is grave. As we discussed during our meeting in your office, the G7 that's being convened in a few days, if we take the past few years of export credit support that China has offered to its companies, it would equate to 90% of the entire G7 combined. And so if we're able to use our tools effectively and catalyze and bring in private sector capital from the United States, I believe we can achieve this mission, and I'd be honored at the opportunity to work with you and with the committee and your staff to make it happen.
Let me follow up on the China comment. As you know, the U.S. is engaged in a great power competition with China and the CCP. Trade disputes and technological advancements have underscored the importance of securing our own supply chains and maintaining our lead in transformational industries and technologies. How do you view the EXIM Bank and in this great competition, and how do we leverage the resources at the EXIM Bank to win this competition?
Senator, it's a great question. And I firmly believe that EXIM has all of the right tools that we need to deploy to help ensure that we could take back control over some of the most vital supply chains that not just American companies, but everyday Americans rely on, and they don't even know it. The best way to do so, I believe, Senator, and I'd be honored to have the opportunity to do so, is to bring them all together in one cohesive strategy that puts this issue at the center and focal point.
Thank you. Mr. Brooke, you've been nominated to oversee the Treasury Department's trade mission. In this capacity, you will be tasked with promoting American investments abroad, fostering partnerships between domestic and foreign financial institutions, and promoting U.S. interests in the global economy. If confirmed for your role, what would be your priorities, and how do you envision working to accomplish your mission?
Thank you so much for the question, Senator, and thank you to you and your staff for everything you've done as we prepare for this hearing. As you mentioned, it's very important that the Treasury Department is active in this space. If confirmed, my priorities would be to promote economic growth and ensure that international institutions return to the basics. Looking at multilateral development banks in particular, it's important to ensure that the U.S. development financing advances our national interest, including countering China's coercive economic and debt practices. It's also important that these multilateral institutions focus on their core missions of economic growth and poverty reduction. And it's also important that we maximize the use of U.S. taxpayer dollars.
Thank you. With my remaining minute or so, Mr. Traynor, you've been nominated to lead HUD's Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, the office responsible for enforcing the Fair Housing Act and addressing housing discrimination across the country. You've shared with us your personal motto, dignity of the individual. I actually find that to be a really strong, positive way of identifying a mission, so to speak, especially in the role of fair housing. Can you speak to why this office is not only vital to HUD's mission, but also personally meaningful to you, given your lifelong commitment to protecting individual rights?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you and your staff. They've been extraordinarily gracious throughout this process. I know how important dignity of the individual is to you, and I know you live it as well, sir. So I would say this. HUD's mission is to support strong and sustainable communities and quality affordable housing while being mindful and serving our most vulnerable fellow Americans. It is often our most vulnerable who find themselves in need of the protections of the law, particularly the non-discrimination principles and due process. As someone who has spent a career ensuring that everyone's dignity was protected, that non-discrimination was addressed, and that everyone was equal before the law, it is a capstone of that career to have President Trump nominate me, particularly in a time of housing shortage and housing challenge, to be the one who oversees the office, along with Secretary Turner's leadership, to ensure that the American dream is not lost, and that our fellow Americans who find a place that they're willing to call home, contribute to a community, raise their family, that there is no invidious reason that they are not able to do that. So this is deeply meaningful to me, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Traynor. Ranking Member Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Traynor, if you're confirmed, you'll be responsible for enforcing the nation's laws barring discrimination in housing. HUD's website says that the office you would lead, the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, quote, works to eliminate housing discrimination and promote civil rights and economic opportunity through housing. Last year, there were more than 34,000 complaints to the Fair Housing Office, the most on record in history. That suggests to me there is a problem nationally with housing discrimination. Mr. Traynor, you describe yourself as a civil rights lawyer, so I just want to go through your record on civil rights. In 2021, you authored a book review entitled, quote, George Floyd and the Rise of the Rival Constitution, where you appeared to agree with arguments that our civil rights laws contributed to the rise of a, quote, rival constitution that threatens our actual Constitution. In a 2022 report to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights on Racial Disparities in Evictions in New York State, you wrote that while you, quote, do not doubt good faith views that racial discrimination many decades in the past somehow reveals itself today in New York's rental market, I do not share this view. Your current civil rights enforcement role at the Department of Education, you are being sued by the NAACP and other civil rights groups for advancing a, quote, legally flawed and unsupported interpretation of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. Mr. Traynor, given your record, why should we trust that you will fulfill the explicit mission of HUD's Fair Housing Office to, quote, eliminate housing discrimination and promote civil rights?
Senator, thank you for that question. I'd look at my career as a civil rights attorney who has represented hundreds upon hundreds of vulnerable New Yorkers in the worst time of their lives, as being oftentimes the only person they can talk to help them navigate a deeply complex and at times unfair system. And that is exactly what I intend to do, is to take that experience and to evaluate complaints that come in, investigate that, and vigorously enforce the law if we find violations. There's no doubt about it.
That's the problem that I'm trying to probe here, Mr. Traynor. You're currently being sued by civil rights groups. You seem to have come to the conclusion that housing discrimination in New York's rental market does not exist. You've raised questions about the constitutionality of our civil rights laws. your record is not indicative of someone who will faithfully uphold the civil rights laws. Instead, it reads like somebody who is hostile to the fundamental premise of civil rights. That makes me think you are just not a serious person for this job. So, Mr. Peters, I'd like to turn to you. As the Assistant Secretary for Export Enforcement, you would be on the front lines enforcing our export controls. Now, export controls are a crucial tool for ensuring that countries like China cannot access our most sensitive technologies and ultimately use them against us. So in February, Senator Hawley and I wrote to the Commerce Department to express our concern that BIS hadn't closed loopholes allowing PRC to acquire millions of advanced AI chips. Last month, Senator Banks and I wrote to NVIDIA to emphasize our concerns that its new R&D facility in Shanghai could lead to the diversion of advanced chips. Mr. Peters, do you agree that we need to impose robust safeguards to ensure that countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE do not simply take our chips and pass them along to China?
Senator Warren, thank you for your question, and I appreciated the opportunity to meet with members of your staff in anticipation of this hearing. As I'm sure you're aware, BIS essentially is divided into two components. There is the enforcement side, which I hope to lead. There is also the administrative side, which has the primary responsibility for rulemaking and policy. I view my role, should I be confirmed, as committed to the aggressive enforcement.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I had a very specific question here. Do you agree that we need to impose robust safeguards to ensure that countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE don't simply take our chips and then pass them along to China?
I agree, Senator Warren, that we need to be committed to vigorous enforcement of export control laws.
Is that a yes or is that a no?
Senator Warren, I believe vigorous...
Is that a yes or is that a no?
Senator Warren, I understand why you would like to reduce this to a yes or no issue.
Yeah, it's actually pretty simple, that we need to worry about countries like Saudi Arabia taking the chips from us and then passing them along to China. I get that we don't send the chips directly to China, but I'm very concerned about handing them to a country that in turn hands them to China. And I just want to know if you're worried about that as well.
Senator Warren, transshipment of technologies is already part of our enforcement mechanism.
I understand that. So can you answer this question then with a yes?
I can answer that. I would be vigorous. I will aggressively enforce the law.
All right. I think that I'm not going to get an answer here.
Thank you both. Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Peters, I'll follow up a little bit and let me be a little more direct in my question to you, and I'll give you an opportunity to fully explain the answer here. Recent reports have identified at least 8 Chinese smuggling networks that have each trafficked over $100 million worth of U.S.-made AI chips into sanctioned Chinese military and research entities. This poses a serious and escalating national security threat. I believe this is happening in part because BIS, the Bureau of Industry Security, lacks the enforcement tools and resources necessary to keep up with the scale and sophistication of this activity. That's why we've introduced the Stop Stealing Our Chips Act with Senator Warner, bipartisan piece of legislation. The intent here is to establish a whistleblower incentive program within BIS aimed at increasing actionable intelligence on illegal exports. If confirmed, drawing on your experience as a federal prosecutor, what additional tools do you believe Congress can provide to strengthen BIS's ability to enforce U.S. export controls? And can you commit to working with Senator Warner and myself on this legislation?
Senator Rounds, thank you for your question. With respect to the issue of resources, as I'm sure you're aware, I'm not yet in the building, and so I don't yet have a clear understanding of exactly what resources we need. I am, however, aware of the publicly available information related to President Trump's proposed budget, which proposes a significant increase for resources to BIS targeted primarily towards enforcement. If, in fact, that budget proposal became the appropriation and we were to be blessed with those resources, it would be part of my charge to immediately set about determining how those resources could be best allocated to meet the national security threats that you've just identified.
Yeah, you'll work with Senator Warner and myself.
I'd be happy to work with you on that, Senator.
Okay. I'm going to come back to you in just a minute, sir. Let me just swing back over for just a minute to Mr. Yvanovich. Sir, as a nominee to be the chair and CEO of the Ex-Im Bank, I want to ask about countering China's aggressive export financing. Earlier this year, Senators Cortez Masto and I introduced the Strengthening Exports Against China Act, a bipartisan measure that would allow Ex-Im to exclude financing tied to China competing technologies from its 2% default cap, thereby boosting support for American exporters in AI, semiconductors, and related sectors. Given China's state-backed subsidies and export credit agencies, some of which you've already referred to, these export credit agencies that heavily support their exporters, what can Ex-Im do today, and what new authorities and flexibility does it need from Congress to level the playing field and make certain that we can effectively counter CCP subsidies? And if confirmed, will you commit to working with Senator Cortez Masto, her office, and mine on this legislation?
Senator Rounds, thank you for the question, and thank you for your continued support of the Export-Import Bank and also supporting all of the flexibility and the modern tools that we need to take on this grave challenge. To put this problem in perspective, sir, the Chinese have spent $3 trillion with a T since the beginning of COVID to further ensure that nations and companies around the world are deeply reliant on their supply chains. And so this will, I can assure you, if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, be a focal point of the front office of the Export-Import Bank. And our hope would be to draw in all the tools, including the China and Transformational Exports Program, of which you've been a big supporter. We don't need to match them dollar for dollar, Senator. We need to do two things and two things very well. Number one, we need to catalyze the great financial markets that we have here to ensure that private capital can flow into these very important industries and opportunities. And two, we really need to unlock the ingenuity of the American worker and American companies and put them first. And if I'm fortunate enough with your support, I'd be honored to work with you and the entire committee.
Thank you. Mr. Peters, just a thought, and I wanted, it was kind of left up in the air, and I know that you were trying to differentiate a little bit for the ranking member on the committee. The concern, you were being asked for a yes or a no answer, but I want to give you, just in the time I've got left, the opportunity to maybe respond a little bit more clearly with regard to the concern that you would have with AI chips that would go to other countries and how you would approach the issue of making sure that they don't end up in the hands of CCP.
So thank you again, Senator, for the opportunity to follow up on this. As I noted, transshipment and diversion of these sensitive technologies, whether it be to an entity on what's known as our entities list, or whether it be something that is controlled as a dual-use item on the CCL, these are the exact subjects of our export control regulations and the Export Control Act the Export Control Reform Act of 2018. My charge, should I be confirmed to this role, would be to vigorously enforce those regulations made criminal under that law. If, in fact, a criminal prosecution can't be achieved, we have other civil and administrative remedies available to us through the export administration regulations, and I would look to vigorously enforce those.
You absolutely understand how critical it is we keep these particular high-value chips out of the hands of the CCP.
I understand, Senator. I share your concern.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Van Hollen, Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations all. And Mr. Peters, I'm going to follow up on Senator Rounds' questions here. You are aware, are you not, that on his recent trip to the UAE, President Trump agreed to transfer lots of very sensitive chips and AI know-how to G42, a state-owned UAE company. You're aware of that agreement, right?
Senator, thank you for the question. I'm certainly aware of the trip as has been publicly reported. The specifics of what was agreed to, unfortunately, I'm not aware of.
All right. So you're aware of the fact that on the eve of departing for his trip to the Gulf states, that the Trump administration rescinded the Biden administration AI diffusion rule. Are you aware of that?
I am aware of the public pronouncements of an intention not to enforce that rule. And my understanding, though I'm not in the building, is that a rescission regulation is forthcoming.
Right. So that rule, of course, was intended to prevent the transfer of very sensitive U.S. chips and AI technology to adversaries, including China. You're aware of the fact that G42 has various ties with the PRC. Are you aware of that fact?
I'm not specifically aware of it, Senator. No.
Well, let me read to you from a letter sent in July of last year to then National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. The letter is from the chairman of the House Committee on Strategic Cooperation with CCP, John Molinar, and the then chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Congressman McCall. It says, I'm just reading, given the ties between the PRC and G42, as well as the PRC's continued interests in the UAE, we ask that the National Intelligence Council prepare an official intelligence community assessment on the ties between G42, including its subsidiaries and affiliates, to the Chinese Communist Party, the People's Liberation Army, or any part of the PRC's apparatus before this partnership proceeds further. So my question to you is, if confirmed, will you argue that this assessment, which the House Republican chair of the Committee on the CCP wanted to see go forward, would be done before the deal with the UAE and G42 would go forward?
Senator, what I can commit is that I would certainly review it. Obviously, rulemaking, policymaking is the province of the export administration side as opposed to enforcement. What I can commit is to a vigorous and aggressive enforcement of those laws and regulations that exist.
Well, I have to tell you, it's extremely troubling because, again, the day before I think President Trump goes to the Gulf, he eliminates this rule that's specifically designed to prevent the diffusion of high-end U.S. technology, chips, and AI to China. He then does this deal with the G42 company. Did you know that 2 weeks before President Trump went to the UAE, his son Eric Trump went and did a deal with a different UAE state-owned company called MGX, whereby MGX used $2 billion from the Trump family new stablecoin company called World Financial as part of a deal? Were you aware of that transaction?
Senator, I have no knowledge of the Trump family business.
I mean, this was also well reported in the press. Did you see any of those stories?
I'm not familiar with those stories, Senator.
Okay. So what happened was Eric Trump, 2 weeks before President Trump arrived, did this deal which dramatically increased the value of the new stablecoin company that the Trump businesses had launched by essentially purchasing $2 billion of this new Bitcoin. So it goes through the roof in value. 2 weeks later, the president comes to the UAE and does a deal with another UAE state-owned company, G42. Do you know who the chairman of G42 is and the chairman of MGX?
No, Senator, I don't.
Well, it happens to be the same person. It happens to be a member of the Emirati royal family. He's the national security advisor, Sheikh Tahoon. I've met him. He's a very good businessman. And he cut a very good deal for G42 with President Trump in terms of getting the transfer of this U.S. technology. And he did it 2 weeks after doing a different deal with Eric Trump that enriched the Trump family business. I have to tell you, this stinks to high heaven. And I hope if you're confirmed, you will work with us to look out for this wrongful transfer, which really puts our security at risk.
Senator Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 10 years ago, there was a call from conservative members, especially in the House, by a lot of right-leaning think tanks to eliminate the Export-Import Bank. And maybe to begin with, I don't hear those calls anymore because I think a lot of, especially Republicans, recognize today that the Export-Import Bank is an important tool that we can use, especially in our competition with China. But Mr. Yvanovich, can you give us maybe a 30-second reason why we should keep it and why the Export-Import Bank matters now, maybe more than it ever has?
Senator Banks, thank you for the question, and thank you for the very detailed, robust conversation that we had in your office with you and your staff. One very clear reason why this is so important is an area that President Trump has already called on the bank to help with, and that's in the area of critical minerals and rare earths. So rare earths are abundantly available, as you and I both know, Senator, but the Chinese control 90+% of its refining and processing capacity. And these serve as the backbone for all value-added manufacturing, military, civilian, everything everyday Americans rely on. And so we cannot afford to see a 21st century that is reliant on China and these very valuable inputs, because then we will be subscribing to a 21st century defined by China. So were I fortunate enough to be confirmed, a top priority would be heeding the president's call and ensuring that the Export-Import Bank has all of its tools available to deliver on this very important goal.
Can you talk for a minute about some of the ways that the communist China has taken advantage of the Export-Import Bank in the past, and how we can fix that in this administration?
Absolutely. And so one of the most challenging times for the Export-Import Bank of the United States was during its lapse of authorization between 2015 and 2019. And so during that period of time alone, $13.3 billion of actionable deals in the pipeline went to foreign competitors. That equated to nearly 80,000 American jobs that were being supported. But the worst part of it all, Senator, was that during that time, China and our adversaries took advantage, and they came and courted U.S. companies and convinced them that they should move abroad because they would have reliable export finance services for them. And so with your support, with the support of the committee, I believe that we could put forth modern tools, and we can ensure that we're all in service of this unifying goal, which is revitalizing America's manufacturing and securing an economic future for.
Can you talk about any other loopholes that I understand the
Sure.
lapse and reauthorization, but loopholes that still exist today that we need to close?
We can get more specific. I think that being cognizant of what U.S. content percentages and mandates look like, particularly in a modern economy where value-added manufacturing requires sourcing from many different suppliers. And that's where the China Transformational Export Program has already been thoughtfully designed to do so. I think that's a very key area. Other areas include ensuring that we can better magnify our outreach to small and medium-sized businesses, because as you know, Senator, it's hard to revitalize a supply chain where small and medium-sized companies don't play a big role. So I'm confident that with your support and the opportunity, we can work together to ensure that the tools are modern and up to task.
And this is a confirmation hearing. So talk about your unique background that suits you for this task to help the president reform and strengthen the Ex-Im Bank to help us beat communist China.
Sure, Senator, thank you for the question. I've spent my entire career on both sides of the table. I know very well what it means to be a capital provider and looking for the right opportunities with willing and able companies who want to unlock growth. I also know the challenges of trying to finance growth and build up export facilities here in America, enable and empower manufacturing companies that want to sell all around the world. And with the opportunity, I would very much like to put all that to use in service of the president's agenda.
Well, appreciate your willingness to serve. To each of you, thank you for being willing to serve at such an important time as this in this administration. You have my full support. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member. Welcome, everybody, to the committee. Mr. DeMarzo, I'm going to start with you. I'll let you know that I've been concerned about the lack of responsiveness of the administration to congressional oversight. So I just want to ask you directly, will you commit to answering letters from all members of Congress in a timely and thorough and substantive manner when we reach out to you and the department?
Yes, Senator, that's our goal. Absolutely.
Okay, well, hopefully it will be also your result.
Yes.
Thank you. Let me ask you also about an issue that's very important to Minnesota. Last October, an affordable housing nonprofit in Minnesota signed a $3.8 million grant contract with HUD through the Green and Resilient Retrofit Program. This was a big deal because it meant that this nonprofit was able to make upgrades to the facility that was in dire need of them, boilers that needed to be replaced, windows that were broken. This is a place where people live, and it was not up to par in any way whatsoever. So then, of course, what happened is that at the behest of DOGE, this grant was terminated and created a lot of ruckus, what was going to happen. Now then, since then, HUD has resumed processing some of these awards as a result of a court order, but this grantee in my home state has not been able to get the funds. And we haven't gotten a response from HUD to any of their questions. So will you commit to me that you will provide this grantee with some clear answers of their status and what's going to happen with this award?
Yes, if confirmed, Senator, I'll work with the program office leadership to look into this specific situation and get the grantee and your constituency information they need.
That's very important. I will look forward to hearing your response. Mr. Traynor, I want to ask you a question. So you've been nominated to serve as Assistant Secretary for Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity at HUD. So let me ask you, do you believe sexual orientation is a choice?
Thank you for the question, Senator.
Yeah, go ahead. Hopefully this is a simple answer.
Yeah, Senator, it's as I'm going to be leading the Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, if confirmed, and enforcing the Fair Housing Act as written by Congress. And sex is a protected category.
Okay, so you do believe that housing discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation is against federal law?
Well, under Title VII, through the Bostock case,
Right.
Sexual orientation is covered within the protected class. That decision does not apply to Title VIII of the Fair Housing Act.
The Fair Housing Act prohibits housing discrimination on the basis of protected characteristics, including sex, and in 2020, the Supreme Court decided in the Bostock decision that sex discrimination under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act also covers sexual orientation and gender identity, because these statuses are inextricably linked to sex. Do you agree with that?
I agree. That's what Bostock held under Title VII.
Okay. Mr. Traynor, do you believe that gender identity is a choice?
Senator, I'm going to be enforcing the Fair Housing Act, and I'm going to be responsive to all court decisions. We're going to enforce the law vigorously, and whatever the law requires, we're going to do that.
So you believe that someone can experience housing discrimination on the basis of gender identity?
Senator, I believe that people have all types of reasons why they do things, but the protected characteristics of Title VIII is what we'll be enforcing vigorously.
So I can count on you to enforce the Fair Housing Act when it comes to gender identity. Is that what you're telling Americans today?
I am telling you, Senator, that you can count on me to enforce the Fair Housing Act as written by Congress and all court decisions interpreting it.
It's so interesting to me that it's so difficult for you just to answer my question and just to say, yes, I believe that gender identity is a protected class and that I am committed to protecting people of different gender identities from discrimination. But so be it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am. Senator Warnock.
Thank you, Chairman Scott. Mr. Traynor, you are President Trump's nominee to lead HUD's Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, responsible for continuing the legacy of civil rights enforcement in housing. So I'd like to ask you a few basic questions. In a now infamous Dear Colleague letter, you wrote about the, quote, false premise that the United States is built upon systemic and structural racism. Mr. Traynor, in your view, have Black Americans historically faced systemic housing discrimination in this country?
Thank you for the question, Senator. There is no doubt about the horrid conditions that our fellow Black Americans were subjected to in the Jim Crow South, and the Civil Rights Acts were not passed in a vacuum. They were addressing very real, deplorable conditions.
But, I don't want to interrupt you, but do you agree that they also experienced it in the North throughout this country, not just in the South?
Yes, Senator, that's undeniable. Of course.
Thank you. Please continue.
So at the end of the day, I have dedicated my career to vindicating the civil rights and the constitutional rights of all Americans, and I take a backseat to no one in my commitment to this. And as I indicated in my statement, I had made it a priority to do appointed criminal defense work so I can represent indigent criminal defendants who did not have the resources to hire an attorney and get zealous representation. And I represented them through the gambit, many of whom were Black Americans, Hispanic, men, women, and as I mentioned, even children. The commonality there is they didn't have the resources and they were vulnerable, and I advocated zealously for them, and
So I take it that you may be making the argument that it's class and not race. Is that the point you're making?
No, I'm saying all Americans are entitled to have their constitutional rights protected.
Let me ask you, what did you mean when you said the false premise that the United States is built upon systemic and structural racism?
Senator, as much as I would like to discuss that dear colleague letter is been enjoined by a federal court, it's under litigation.
So let me ask you this: Do you believe Black Americans still experience the consequences of that historic discrimination today?
Senator, I do believe that in a country this size, there is still discrimination invidious against Black Americans and others, yes.
Do you believe that Black Americans and other minorities continue to face systemic housing discrimination in this country today, and that still warrants federal oversight and enforcement?
Senator, the Fair Housing Act is very clear that race is a protected class, and if somebody has an invidious discriminatory intent and denying a Black American the ability to transact in the housing market, that is illegal, and we will vigorously enforce it.
So intent is the premise upon which you would prosecute this or pursue it. Do you think it warrants federal oversight and enforcement? Do you think it warrants federal enforcement and oversight?
Do I think that yes, if we have a complaint alleging discriminatory actions, it violates facts, violates the law, we're going to vigorously enforce that.
You speak of complaints as if they're a rare thing. Are you aware of the amount of appraisal bias that we deal with in this country? Is that an issue at all on your radar screen?
I understand there are complaints as to appraisal value bias, yes.
What are your thoughts? Do you think that's myth, that people are making it up? Do you think the data supports that we have a real problem, something that the chairman and I have discussed, and around appraisal bias? Because this is critical. This is literally money out of people's pockets. Like, this is real wealth.
Senator, as I said in my statement, discrimination under the Fair Housing Act is not only illegal, it is morally reprehensible. And if that is happening, we're going to enforce the law and see that justice is done by individual Americans.
I can assure you that appraisal bias is happening. Are you aware of the 34,000 fair housing complaints filed last year?
Senator, I'm not in the building, so I can't speak to specifics.
Do you believe HUD has a legal obligation under the Fair Housing Act to try and reduce, if not eliminate, the housing discrimination that Black Americans and other minority groups have faced in this country for decades?
Senator, I can commit to you that if confirmed as the next Assistant Secretary for Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, I will vigorously enforce the Fair Housing Act for all Americans.
I would hope so. We would be counting on that to happen. Honestly, based on your history, I'm not convinced of that, and I'm going to strongly encourage my colleagues to oppose your nomination. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Senator Kim.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Yvanovich, I want to start with you. I wanted to ask you, do you view U.S. dominance in biotech and biomedical science as critical to our strategic competitiveness with China?
Senator Kim, first off, thank you for all of your impassioned support of the Export-Import Bank and all of the legislation that you've supported. Yes, absolutely.
Do you think the EXIM Bank is doing enough on biotech and biomedical sciences?
Sir, as you know, I'm not yet confirmed. I'm not in the building. But what I can affirmatively say is that the China and Transformational Exports Program that's been outlined and designed to enable the bank to support U.S. companies that are looking to address these issues and in total 10 critical sectors should be put to use to address this very issue.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. About $2.4 billion went through the China and Transformational Exports Program. Only $50 million of that went to biotech and biomedical science. So I just point that out. I know you're not there yet, but we're talking about $8.7 billion across XM in financing, $50 million I know there are a lot of priorities that are out there, but I just want to draw your attention. You know, the Belfer Center, for instance, just came out saying that of the 5 critical tech sectors out there, China has the most immediate opportunity to overtake the U.S. in biotech. Our own U.S. National Security Commission on emerging biotech said that our window to act is closing. So I just want to hear from you just right now your assurance that this is something that you will look into, that you will work with me on, and we'll try to find the appropriate way for us to make sure that we are meeting this moment on biotech and biomedical research and science.
Senator, you can count on me to work with the committee to ensure that every single tool, but especially CTEP, is ready and mobilized to address this very key issue.
One thing that I saw in the 2023 XM report to Congress, it revealed that nuclear energy is a growing area of foreign demand for U.S. goods and services. From your perspective, do you think that that's an area of opportunity for XM?
I do.
Good. I hope to work with you on that. Mr. Peters, I'd like to just turn to you. I wanted to just ask, you know, with the work that you do that you would be doing in BIS, I just wanted to ask you, what is the entity list?
Thank you for the question, Senator. The entity list is a somewhat comprehensive list of individuals and organizations throughout the world that require a license, regardless of the item, for that item to be exported from the United States to that entity. As I understand it, there is a presumption of denial that comes with that licensing request.
Do you think it's an important tool?
Clearly, it's an important tool for us, Senator.
I just raised that because I guess, you know, in the previous administration, we saw, for instance, when it comes to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, 1,056 entities added to the entity list. I wanted to ask, are you aware of how many the Trump administration has added to the entity list regarding Russia?
Senator, as you're aware, I'm not yet confirmed. I'm not in the building. So
this is public information. I was able to get it just off the internet. Are you aware of the number?
No, I'm not, Senator.
Okay, the number is 0. You know, I just want to point that out in terms of how many entities have been added to the entity list regarding Russia's invasion. You know, I say this because even not just on Russia, but globally, I'm guessing you're not aware of globally how many the Trump administration has added to the entities list at this point.
I am not, Senator.
So that number is 12 in the entirety of this administration so far. So I guess I'm just trying to get a sense of what priority this administration is placing on something that you thought was an important tool. And I get it, you're not there yet, but if confirmed, you will be. So I guess I just wanted to ask you if you would commit to restarting the regular cadence of the entity list actions, including entities supporting Russia's illegal invasion and war.
Senator, I can commit that I'm going to approach this with the seriousness that it deserves. The enforcement side of BIS has a role in nominations to the entities list. Without prejudging any particular entity, I would take that portion of our responsibilities very seriously in working with my colleagues.
Okay, I mean, look, I'll be honest, that's not a satisfying answer, but I hope to work with you if you are confirmed on this because, look, I want BIS to succeed. In fact, I've been advocating for additional resources to BIS at a time when those resources are actually being pulled away. Things are getting much more complicated in this world when it comes to export controls, when it comes to the proliferation of critical technologies that are out there. And I don't think BIS is meeting the moment. I don't think they are staffed to the level that is needed. And I'm worried that this administration is going to be pulling that back. So I just want to say that, and I hope to have a chance to work with you if you are confirmed. But I am concerned about where this administration is going when it comes to BIS and these important tools that we have. And with that, I'll yield back.
Thank you, Senator. Senator also Brooks.
Thank you so much to Chair Scott, Ranking Member Warren. Thank you so much for holding today's hearing. To each of you, congratulations, and thank you for being here today. I have questions for Mr. DeMarzo and then Mr. Traynor, 3 questions I'm going to try to get through pretty quickly. Mr. DeMarzo, you will manage the relationship between HUD and Congress, and this is a relationship that I would say has already been damaged because this administration lacks transparency and responsiveness. For example, in February, Ranking Member Warren, myself, Senator Smith, all sent a letter to HUD asking for details on the $260 million worth of contracts that DOJ called wasteful. Nearly 4 months later, we've received a half-page response that ignored all of our questions. We still don't know which contracts HUD intends to cancel and why. And these contracts are important because they are with entities that could expand, for example, housing supply, provide rental assistance, and prevent homelessness, and fight housing discriminations. And 4 months later, we still don't know which important services the Trump administration wants to eliminate. Secretary Turner's team could not answer the questions as well, and so I'm hoping you can help us. I'm going to restate the exact question that Ranking Member Warren, Senator Smith, and I sent in our February 20th letter, which simply says, what are the specific components of the $260 million in contracts that Secretary Turner called wasteful during his February 11th, 2025 media appearance, and which contracts has HUD canceled? So I want to ask you that question.
Well, thank you, Senator. And yes, if confirmed, I promise to work with our program offices to look into that. As you know, there's no leadership in the office right now because I haven't been confirmed. So we need confirmed leaders. It's what we're working on today with Mr. Trainer's confirmation also, so we can process those requests, get you the information that you need.
Okay, thank you, because we do need those answers right away.
Yes.
In the same vein, there are homeless youth providers in my state, Maryland, that are still waiting for their HUD contracts to be finalized and honored. These delays, some of which are from 2024, are at serious risk of forcing excellent organizations to stop providing critical services in our community. And I think we should all be proud of the tremendous work that they have done. I'm also proud to partner with my colleague, Senator Katie Britt, on legislation that would support homeless organizations by aligning the federal definitions of homelessness, streamlining services, and leveraging resources. And so I'm so frustrated that these organizations in my state and across the country cannot access their funding. And this is months after HUD has awarded the contracts. And little information has been provided. Will you also work to make sure that we can, we want to know the status of the HUD contracts, particularly youth homelessness demonstration program contracts, which are preventing us from ending youth homelessness. So just want to ask whether you will work with us to get the information that we need quickly in any specific situation that these situations can be resolved.
Well, thank you, Senators. The Secretary testified yesterday to Senate Appropriations. Youth homelessness, foster youth, helping and supporting them is one of his top priorities for the department. So absolutely, we'll work with your office and Senator Britt's office. If confirmed, I'll work with the program office leadership to look into that and help you with that issue.
Thank you so much. Mr. Trainer, the Fair Housing Act is one of the enduring legacies of the civil rights movement, and recent investigations by HUD have led to millions of dollars in relief for victims of fraud and bad practices from landlords and mortgage lenders. The office that you've been nominated to lead has been an effective partner in putting money back in the hands of American consumers. Yet more than 115 fair housing cases have been halted or closed since President Trump entered office. The president has proposed slashing your budget by 2/3, and reports suggest that 1/3 of your future employees could be eliminated. So Mr. Trainer, know you don't control the budget, but want to know whether you do have the power, however, to at least provide a thoughtful answer to constituents on this committee as to why 115 cases have been terminated. So wonder whether you will commit to providing information to this committee and to the affected parties about the 115 pending housing discrimination cases that have been terminated or halted by President Trump.
Senator, thank you for that question. As my hopefully soon-to-be colleague, Mr. DeMarzo, indicated, I would have to be confirmed in the building, but I am happy to look at this inquiry that you and your colleagues have and hopefully be responsive to you sooner rather than later.
Okay, good. So you will provide responses about the 115 cases to this committee?
I will review the requests that you have, Senator, and work with the processes at HUD and hope to get you a response.
No, not hope to get me a response. I'm asking whether you'll get this committee a response, the Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee.
As I indicated, Senator, I will look at this. I will and work through HUD processes, and we'll try to be as responsive as possible. Sure.
Okay, thank you. I yield.
That concludes the question and answer portion of today's hearing. I'd like to thank the nominees for testifying before the committee today, and thank you for your willingness to serve our country. For senators, all follow-up questions for the record must be submitted by 12 p.m. Friday, June 13th, tomorrow. And for our witnesses, please respond by Monday, June the 16th at 5 p.m. to the written questions you receive in order to facilitate the committee promptly processing these nominations. With that, the hearing is concluded.